I'm Lisa Hall, Director of Human Resources at the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons. Well, let's look at the dictionary definition of difficult. It means needing much effort or skill to complete. So if you reduce the effort and increase the skill required to have a difficult conversation, it no longer becomes difficult. That seems too simple. And even if you do reduce the effort and increase the skill, conversations can still seem difficult. Patterson and Grenny, two leading business experts, say that there's 3 elements that are likely to be present when there is a difficult conversation, or sometimes known as a crucial conversation. They are strong emotions, high stakes, and opposing opinions. If you think about the times when you have had what you thought was a difficult conversation, these 3 elements were probably in play. Plan and practice. If you think the conversation may be difficult, ask yourself if the 3 elements are likely to be in play at any part in the conversation. If they are, then think about what the possible responses you may encounter and how you might reply to them. Think about what action you might take if you don't have an answer to a question and how you envisage the conversation concluding. Sometimes you can't plan for a difficult conversation. You may not know that they have an opposing opinion as you've never spoken to them about it before. You might go into a meeting with one of your team to talk about their performance, which you think they have the same opinion as you, but that might not be the case. Even if you plan, you may not expect the responses you prepared for. And sometimes what you think is going to be a straightforward conversation suddenly isn't. Most difficult conversations are spontaneous, and this is where the skill in managing a difficult conversation really helps. You may have mentally rehearsed, but practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. In your preparation, look for mutual purpose. What are you both likely to want from the discussion? Think about what you want for you, for the individual, and the relationship. Start with your heart and ask, what is it you really want from this conversation? And ensure you leave the conversation both feeling satisfied you've achieved the outcome, and think about what you don't want and how you might explain this in the conversation. A good deep breath beforehand. It's remarkably good at steadying the nerves. Don't think that this one conversation is going to solve a problem. This may only be the start. So balance your expectations and minimize your own personal expectations of what you will achieve, thus reducing any stress or anxiety about the conversation. Think about the sort of things that trigger your behavior. Look at taking the Styles Under Stress test. We'll provide you with that information. And this will help you to understand if you turn to silence or to violence when you're under pressure. Some signs of silence are masking real feelings like sarcasm and sugarcoating, avoiding, such as turning the conversation into maybe a different direction, and withdrawing, such as pretending you have another meeting or a call. Violent signs are, and let's be clear here, this is not physical violence, controlling or coercing others into your way of thinking, or attacking, such as belittling or threatening. Once you know how you are likely to behave under stress, then you can use these techniques to manage and stay calm. Well, firstly, don't think of it as a difficult conversation. Despite the 3 elements likely to be in play, remember a difficult conversation is likely to have strong emotions, high stakes, and opposing opinions. It's just an opportunity to enter into dialogue with someone. Think about what you really want from the conversation for you, for others, and for the relationship. Create a safe environment by politely explaining that you would like to talk about something. Be clear and precise about what it is you want to talk about. Make sure the opening statement about why you want to have the conversation has no malicious intent. Let's say you want to talk to David about his ability to arrive at a meeting on time. Something like, David, I'd like to talk to you about your punctuality. So it's a simple opening statement. When you understand the purpose behind somebody else's strategy, you realize that you actually have compatible goals. Ask yourself questions like, what do we really both want here? It's critical to maintain safety in a conversation. Don't let the other person think you have an agenda to get your own way, or that it's a chance to manipulate the situation to your way of thinking. If you think the conversation is no longer safe, then step out of it. And what I mean by that is to reset the conversation. An apology might be appropriate at this stage, but not always. When we're under attack, our heart takes a sudden turn. We stop worrying about the conversation, start to look for ways to win, push our views forward, or keep the peace. As I mentioned before, winning is typically what everybody wants to do, but stay with your heart and ask, what do I really want from this conversation? Somebody once called me out in a large meeting about expenditure. I could have easily resulted to taking a violence approach by verbally attacking who asked the question. But I thought, what did I really want from this conversation? So I said, I'm really glad that you raised the question. Thank you for taking the risk. We need to talk about it, and I appreciate the trust you showed in me. When we present our brain with demanding questions, our body sends precious bloods to the parts of our brain that helps us think, and away from our body parts that helps us take fight or flight. Asking what we really want reminds us of the goals, and secondly, it juices up the brain in a way that helps us to stay focused. There's another technique that can be used when answering difficult questions. Ask yourself how you can have a difficult conversation and retain the relationship. The power of this is interesting and typically prevents someone taking fool's choice. Now, fool's choice is about believing we have to choose between telling the truth and keeping a relationship. If someone believes that you have their best interests at heart in the conversation, you'll be able to answer challenging questions. But if you genuinely don't know the answer to a question, just say, and rearrange to go back to the meeting and answer it another day. Well, I thought another team was doing a particular piece of work that was really critical, and the director of that team thought my team was doing the work. So it came to light that nobody had done the work. So the director came to me and asked who'd done it. I knew when she came to me that it was going to be a crucial conversation, because she immediately adopted a violence position and started to verbally attack me. Whilst I tried to reach a position of mutual purpose, in that this needed to be done for the benefit of the organisation, the dialogue was extremely difficult. So I decided to step out of the conversation and say, could we discuss when emotions were less high? We did eventually have a less difficult conversation, but in that moment, it was really difficult to reach mutual purpose. I think I handled it badly. I look back and I do recall saying to the other director to stay calm, so I definitely wouldn't do that in the future. Plus, I don't know if I would step out of the conversation again, but at that time, it felt like the right thing to do. Well, most importantly, don't take fool's choice. We talked about that before. It's about believing we have to choose between telling the truth and keeping a relationship. Have the facts about why you think the performance is poor and be able to compare them to the standard that you should be delivering, that they should be delivering to. It's likely you will have already had previous conversations about poor performance, but they usually tend to be low-level discussions where a manager expects to see some improvements. I think most managers are able to have those conversations. It's when that performance doesn't change, when it becomes a difficult conversation, as it's more likely that those three elements of high stakes, opposing opinions, and strong emotions are in play. Take them through each area of poor performance and ask them to articulate what it is that they think the level of work is that they are demonstrating. Remember some of the techniques that we've briefly talked about, such as keeping mutual purpose. You will both want the employee to succeed. Think about the contrasting approach, the don't want and do want. For example, what I don't want is for your work to continue to fail. But what I do want is to see some improvements so that you can get back to your usual standard of work. And use the use of and. For example, how can we increase your level of performance and not let you think I don't value your work? Well, releasing somebody from work should always be thoroughly thought through. There can be many legal implications if this process isn't followed correctly, and you should always seek advice from an HR professional or an employment lawyer beforehand. Be sure this is for the right reasons, and be sure it's for the right decision for the employer and the employee. Make sure you considered all avenues before making this decision. If you're letting someone go from a job, then ACAS, so that's the Arbitration, Conciliation and Advisory Service, have a protocol it recommends that you should follow, which is fair for the employer and fair for the employee. It should be clearly explained what any gaps in performance were and why the decision has been made. We talked a bit about this already, and I would recommend looking for mutual purpose. Don't go into the conversation just all out to win. Think about what you really want, which might be winning a contract for the company. And this is likely to be shared with other colleagues. So use that to steer the conversation. Make sure you've got the data to support your claims and present the risk when facing opposition. And again, don't take false choice. Well, my approach has been mainly through observations and then doing. I've watched many different approaches to dealing with difficult conversations, and importantly, not just at work. In fact, I find my family and friends provide me with lots of opportunities to practice. Then I read the theory to help cement my observations and learn additional techniques. Practice has always helped me. I don't think anyone enjoys role playing with colleagues about possible difficult situations, but the more you can hone your skills, the better you will be at difficult conversations and the less they will be difficult. Whilst I think I'm a bit better now than I was when I first started my career around difficult conversation, there's still a long way to go to master this art. As I said at the beginning, you can plan and prepare for the conversations, but the most difficult conversations are the ones that are spontaneous. That's when your experience is really tested. Conversations can go from what appears to be a good discussion to a crucial one in a heartbeat. And being prepared for that, knowing the signs, is a special craft. There's lots of reading material, so stick your head in a book and then play around with the techniques, and remember, to know and not to do is not to know.